respect you, Nobel Prize winner, Kendrick
The
Lamar.
only one I will never want as an enemy is Kendrick Lamar.
I mean, especially after the weight of this beef. I know so little about this man. I think he's a very talented artist. I don't know about that album. I don't know about the lyrics on the diss track. I don't even know the dates of all the dissing that was going on. I don't know a lot about these people's careers. I'm not an expert. I'm just going to tell you what I would tell them if they were sitting with me, and I'm just an astrological enthusiast.
I
Um,
think it makes it better that you don't, because you're not bringing a bunch of biases and baggage. So it's really just seeing, is astrology real? If astrology says what's going on here
right.
without you knowing ahead of time, it proves that this is true.
Yeah, is astrology even real?
Let's find
Uh,
out. This is the going to be the video
this is the
that
video
answers
that
that
solves
question.
that question for everyone. That's so funny. So my take on astrology is that we as individuals incarnate within these soul families, which are connected to the planets. And the planets are involved in these galactic karmic cycles that we get distilled down to us as individuals who play out that karma in all these really charged up ways that feel really personal. And at the same time, it's very collective.
Mhm.
I think that the planets and the archetypes that are embedded within the planets and the signs get to shapeshift as we live the archetypes. So I think what's really exciting about astrology is that as we engage with it, we also get to redefine what these archetypes mean, how they function in society, how we get to perpetuate this karma or redirect it. And that's why I think celebrity charts are really interesting to study. They get to serve as an example of how these archetypes are shape-shifting in front of our eyes. So thank you, Kendrick Lamar. Thank you, Drake, for making
Thanks,
your birth
Drake.
times widely available. They have the highest rated birth times. So
Phenomenal.
they consented to that. They showed up with their birth certificates and they were like, read my chart.
You asked for this, Kendrick.
I respect you, Nobel Prize winner, Kendrick
The
Lamar.
only one I will never want as an enemy is Kendrick Lamar.
I mean, especially after the weight of this beef. So here we have Kendrick Lamar, who was born on a Wednesday, a Mercury's day. All the days of the week have different planets associated with them. So he's got Mercury. And he was born June 17th, 1987, 3:04 p.m. in Compton, California. Like I said, highly rated birth time. So we can be confident about this one.
The
And
Compton part feels very important too.
it feels really, really important because it's so symbolic of hip hop culture and also about the way that African American identity is projected to the whole world, right? Yeah, Compton feels like this really loaded place for the formation of American identity, especially African American identity. We have this birth chart, the map of the sky at the time that Kendrick Lamar was born. The sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the time of Kendrick Lamar's birth is Libra, and it's towards the end of Libra. So that's another reason why his birth time is so important because like if he had been born half an hour later, his rising would have been Scorpio. Libra is ruled by Venus. Libra is all about harmony, it's about peace, it's about relationships.
He has like a beautiful family and he seems like he's doing great in that regard. So
I'm not shocked because of the emphasis his chart has on devotion and service. And also,
hmm.
the family unit seems something that is about his whole life, and also thinking critically about what it means to have a family and how that fits into your family culture, pulls out into your community's culture is a theme for Kendrick because Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus is in his chart is in Gemini in the ninth house. So in the ninth house, it's all about your philosophy, your perspective on culture, on other cultures, on politics, also heavily spiritual. So sometimes it's about religion and theology, and in a very balanced way, especially when like a planet like Venus and the sun are both in the ninth house. It's more balanced where it's less about dogma and being moralistic and following rules, but it's more about what's for the best of all people in this society. Like, what's for the good of the community. And Venus in Gemini is like in love with ideas, is super curious, is really interested in taking on new ways of looking at things and just being creative and insightful and not being too attached to a particular ideology, having fun, playing with thoughts, playing with ideas, being super curious and playfully intellectual. Also, hunger for learning different forms of language. That's all coded in the ninth house with Gemini there. And then Venus is very much about family. It's about comfort. It's also about children and wanting to show up for the younger generation. I could really see Kendrick Lamar being someone who loves to show young people the way and who really looks out for kids, who is really interested in making sure kids get the best that they can from what life has to offer them. And then also being Chiron here, Chiron is the wounded healer. It's all about pain that gets transmuted into wisdom and teaching. And this could be about seeing children suffer, seeing people in his community go through hardship and being like, this is not right. I want to support. I want to show up in a way that's going to heal some big wounds. I want to challenge the status quo of what people think of my community, how people project certain ideas onto my community. And I want to subvert how not only how we show up, but how people think we get to show up. Sun and Gemini in the ninth house, it's a really nice place for the sun. The sun in the ninth house in particular, in Hellenistic astrology, it's called house of the sun's joy.
Wow.
Yeah, and so the sun can really support the ruling planet of his chart, Venus, while they're in the same house together. And then from the ninth house, the sun is making trine, supportive aspect to the first house. So if the first house is helm of a ship and the ruler of that house is the pilot driving that ship, it's also supported by the sun, how you radiate your personality. And so it's like natural leadership signatures in the chart, and then really wanting to show up for your family and connect that to community, which is really beautiful. I'm also interested to know more about Kendrick Lamar's dad because the sun sometimes represents the father. And so we have Chiron here, so there are definitely some pain attached to the father. And at the same time, it's a really nice position for the sun. I wonder if Kendrick Lamar's dad dealt with some challenges that were kind of systemic and he couldn't overcome in his lifetime, but he was like a really smart guy, really curious, self-taught, naturally intelligent person who passed down his intellect to Kendrick. And this signature shows that he wants to pass that on to his children too, and younger generation in general. He wants to carry on the legacy of his father's intellect, basically, which is really beautiful.
He's got some lyrics in his recent album that speaks to that. His father took him as far as he could, and his son will go further than him. Like there's this super strong emphasis on that lineage. It's beautiful. I'm curious about, so he's going to be hosting the Super Bowl in 2025. He's also starting a tour with SZA next year as well. So I'm curious, as the audience, as the world looking and watching Kendrick, does the chart say anything about what we could maybe expect for him in the year?
That's amazing because he's currently in a 10th house profection year. And so the 10th house is all about your career. And especially when the midheaven is there, which was like directly above Kendrick at the time of his birth. So it was part of the sky that's the most visible. And so metaphorically in your chart, it represents the most visible parts of you. And a time when that part of your chart is activated, it's a time in your life when you are highly visible. So it makes sense that he's going to be so visible this year. And also, it's going to be a challenging year for him because Mars is in this part of the chart. A lot of his planets go back to Mars. In the last year, when he was 36, he was in a ninth house year, which was ruled by Mercury. But where's Mercury? Mercury's in the 10th house, applying to Mars in this tricky configuration where Mercury's like getting into fights. Literally, last year was about getting into fights.
He was scrapping last year.
He was really scrapping.
He was squabbling up, you could even say.
He was definitely squabbling. And this year, he's got Cancer in the 10th house, which is ruled by the moon in the 6th house, and Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter, in Aries in the 7th house, which is ruled by Mars in the 10th house. So it's like, it's kind of, it's a few steps, but it goes back to Mars for the last few years. Mars is the most challenging planet in his chart because he was born during the day. And it's a very prominent planet for him, which is super interesting. Mars in his chart is in Cancer, which is technically a place of detriment. It's not an ideal place for Mars, but I also think of Mars in this sign or any planet in detriment as having the opportunity to do things differently. So there's an innovative streak with Mars and Cancer because Mars is usually in across from Cancer and Capricorn. Mars is really happy. Mars loves being in Capricorn because it's like more about just like getting things done and being in structure, being almost like general at war. There's this real productive quality to it. And then in Cancer, it's all about the fluid waters of the womb and being a little emotional and loosey-goosey. But then there's this opportunity to do Mars things really differently, to do these really masculine, productive things, but more geared towards advocating for women and children or for marginalized people, showing up in situations of conflict and like being the bigger person and saying, "Hey, I'm ready to forgive myself. I'm ready to forgive you. I'm ready to turn a new page." So I think there's the possibility for this conflict to deepen and then also for some kind of insight to rise to the surface and that to be this almost hopeful message that people get to absorb.
That would be a twist for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And then kind of going back to this theme of family, Mars and Cancer is so much about family and children and kind of more maternal roles. So there could be this emphasis on, yeah, just advocating for women and children broadly. What I've heard about some of this beef is that like Drake, is like the shitty dad or something. He's like not showing up for his family in a way that Lamar feels is an integrity. That's kind of what seems to be fueling a lot of the content of the lyrics. So,
And there's that point around preying on women and children, like preying on young women.
right, yes, the predator stuff. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Really wanting to expose that in a way that kind of like ends it, right?
Hmm. And there was a lyric in his most recent album, um, where he specifically says what we don't do is he references something that happened in pop culture where these two Black comedians from um, the UK went on this white guy's podcast here in the US and were like laughing along when that guy spoke ill of Black women. And he, in of all the things he talks about in his album, Kendrick specifically calls out like what we don't do is, kiki and laugh about Black women on some white man's podcast. So that thing of like defending women, and I as a Black woman and many other Black women really appreciated that Kendrick as a Black man spoke about defending Black women.
I feel like he has a lot of integrity, which is a Mars and Cancer theme of, slipping out of integrity and then coming back in integrity, like flirting with the edge of what's appropriate when it comes to conflict.
Oh,
Um,
I was thinking of the lyric where I think that it's like him talking to God or something like that. I don't know. But basically there's this point where um the person talking to Kendrick tells Kendrick, you love war. And Kendrick is like, no, I don't. I want peace. And the person it could be the devil, but it could be God, is just like, no, you don't. You love it. And Kendrick was like, yeah, you're right. So that is definitely something that he like clearly is working through. And it is something, someone who is rooted in love, there's that weird thing where you appreciate when people advocate for you, when they fight for you. And there's the knowing that fighting isn't actually how things are resolved. They're resolved through like transcending the idea that the fight is even necessary. That's one worldview. So yeah, him saying like, yeah, and I love it. Like one of the sections of one of his diss tracks that I only listened to once and I was like, shocked. He just has a whole section where he's like, yeah, I hate you. I mean, like, oh, you're calling me a hater? Well, yeah, I hate this and this, like, and just starts listing all the things that he hates about Drake. And it's just like, I don't like hate and love tend to be in opposition. So it is, yeah, it's interesting, as you mentioned, that God and spirituality are such major parts of his chart because, most condensed, God is love. And so to sort of be in his music and see those themes play out where he's like, yeah, I hate him and I'm going to embarrass him and I'm going to hurt his feelings and I'm going to speak ill of him. And that being also part of like, just the wider rap world is to like have a bravado and have an aggressiveness. So it's so interesting.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting that you mention that figure he's speaking to in the song is ambiguous if it's God or the devil, because Mercury ruling Gemini, where the ruler of his chart lives, Mercury is a trickster. And also Mercury is hanging out with Mars, which could be interpreted as, Mercury is ruling the house of God and also is hanging out with the devil over here. So it's, getting information from all sides. And then to this piece about transcending conflict, it's like, well, how do you transcend conflict? You immerse yourself in it, right? Like,
Mm,
you let yourself go through it.
mm,
So I think there's something about the way he models conflict, again, with Mars in this really prominent, visible place in his chart, where it's like we learn about having conflict by watching him go through the conflict. And there's something
mm,
healing and cathartic about the way he expresses these dissenting opinions that kind of helps the collective process their own feelings of rejection, being an outsider, feeling unwanted, and then also really wanting and needing to belong in a community where you feel valued. So,
What I
yeah.
think is so interesting, and I this is truly going beyond my lore, my hip hop understanding, but Drake was involved with in a feud with some other rapper a few years ago, and Drake won very decisively.
Mm.
And what I think is so interesting about, I think, very public people engaging in conflict is that there's a sense that anyone we are strongly rooting for, we will turn our back on them. And vice versa. People who we are, lots of recriminations and we're, speaking ill of, we will go back to being on their side. I think about like Martha Stewart, for instance, where it felt like the culture was kind of against her. And now enough time has passed where now there's a Netflix documentary and we're all on her side again.
Yeah, it's
Same
so
thing like
true.
Britney Spears. Like there are all these like, and it seems like it's like this thing where it's like, yeah, we want to see you rise, then we want to speak ill, and then we want to see you rise. And that kind of feels like it's the end. So there's a part of me, and I'm wondering if the chart says anything about, it feels like we're on his side, like he won the beef in terms. Does the chart say anything about how that will actually affect, like if there'll be any shift in that, like our perception of him?
Well, I think that as he enters the next year, there's going to be an opportunity for him to connect with other people in his network, because the next year is going to be all about acquaintances and networks and more like professional networking. And there may be, it's ruled by the sun, which is in a nice position, but then it's close to Chiron, which is like this place of point. So there may be an opportunity for him to kind of reflect on things that didn't go so well and places where his own authority was undermined because of his own actions. I think that's coming up, but I do feel like because this year is this 10th house, that's so Marsy, and also in this cultural moment, we're having a Mars retrograde that's very personal for him because Mars is going to go direct at this degree of Cancer, at the degree of Cancer that it's on for him. So there may be something that happens towards the end of February, which is when the Super Bowl is, that may be this moment of reckoning or resetting or just forcing him to retrace his steps a little bit in this time. Mars will go retrograde December 6th. And it's going to be retrograde till February 23rd. So I don't know the exact date of the Super Bowl, but I know it's at end of February. So there's going to be this opportunity for him to look at not only how conflict impacts his work, but also how conflict undermines his reputation. And I have a feeling that it's going to be good for him this year, partially because in February, so in every month of every year, another house is activated in the chart that complements the main house. So it's the 10th house, it's the main activation. But then in February, he's going to get a minor activation from the 6th house, which is the house of Mars's joy. And he has the moon in Pisces over there in a pretty tight trine in a supportive relationship to Mars. So I think by the time that the Super Bowl rolls around, there's going to be more energy, more excitement, more people wanting to celebrate him and be on his side. And I wonder if by the time his next birthday rolls around in June, there'll be some kind of not apology, but just like public recognition that maybe some harm has been done. and reflection on that. I don't really see him apologizing to Drake. I don't think that's what this is about because I see so Mars rules the second and seventh houses in his chart, and those are the houses of resources, which includes um like the stuff that you have access to, but also like money and how you make a living. And then the seventh house, which is about romance, one-on-one partnerships, business partnerships, just one-on-one situations. And so he literally makes money from fighting. He gets him paid. So I don't think he's gonna stop fighting, but I do think he will have some kind of insight by his next birthday on what conflict really means and why it's important to go through conflict in a particular type of way.
Wow. If you were to watch this video or if we were to get a reading from you, what's sort of the one thing you want him to walk away with?
Thank you for being a righteous defender. You have so much wisdom through the difficult things you've seen. You've seen some shitty things in your life, and you're so vocal about making sure those things stop. So I think, yeah, engage in the conflict, engage and show up and share about things that really impassion you and things that will make the world a better place. And keep doing that. Thank you for doing that. Like, it's a service to everyone.
Mm. Now, if this were my video, I'd say, now where can people find you? Let me know if that's supportive. I know people who actually know are probably going to be heated, but honestly, comment below. Are they going to want to get a reading after this?
Okay, this is true. Well, if you want to book a reading, there's a link in the comments. I'm gonna stop the share actually, and then people can just like see our faces. So if you want to get a reading, feel free to book some time on my calendar. It's in the comments. I would love to sit with you. And Chimdi, where can people find you?
You can find me on my YouTube channel at Chimdi. And if you want some support, I'm also a creative coach, and I host a weekly roundtable for other creators every Wednesday at noon with Hello Creator.
Yay! Oh my gosh, this was so fun. Thank you, Chimdi.
So, of course. So the next one's going to be Drake. People can come back to your channel to see the next one.
Yes, yes, I will be doing a reading on Drake. So get ready. It's coming.